r/Nosleep. Posted by u/PocketOxford. Maybe my grandmother's stories weren't just stories. Part 1. Last summer, my friend and I decided to spend a few months at my family's old cabin deep in the valleys of eastern Norway. Jack never came back. I still don't know where he is or what happened to him in those woods. Or what happened to me that night. I question my sanity at times. I certainly question his. All I know for sure is that I need to get this off my chest, or I will lose my mind. So let me tell you the story. I think it all started as soon as Jack and I embarked on the 2-hour hike to the cabin. The path was not well used, but my grandfather had marked the trees a long time ago. I had brought a GPS just in case, but I knew where the cabin was. Anyway, there was nothing but empty woods here, nothing really dangerous. Well, at least that's what I thought. We parked the car, slammed the doors shut, grabbed our packs, and hit the forest. 2 hipsters in flannel shirts off to discover their inner lumberjacks. Not 5 minutes off the road, Jack stopped. "What?" I asked, irritated. "Check it out, there's some chick over there." He pointed into the forest. A woman was standing about 100 meters away from us. Her blonde hair glistened in the rays of sunshine that pierced through the firs. Her long, flowy green dress moved in the wind, and the thin material revealed a voluptuous body. For a moment, I just stared, mesmerized. "What do you think she's doing out here?" Jack asked in a hushed voice. "I dunno, it's super weird, no?" I responded, also lowering my voice, not really knowing why. "We're pretty far from civilization." Jack made a motion to wave at the woman. I didn't know why, but I suddenly got a strong feeling that this was a bad idea. "Dude, don't," I hissed, grabbing his arm. "Why not?" he replied, understandably annoyed. "It's fucking creepy," I said, before I realized how dumb that sounded. A woman alone in the forest wasn't really creepy at all. We were 2 strong men, after all. I should have gone with my go-to excuse of it's just Norwegian culture that I had used every time someone in the States had suggested that I was doing something weird. Why? I really didn't have a good reason why, and I didn't want to tell my coolest friend that the girl gave me the willies. "How would you feel if you were alone in a forest with 2 big, strange guys?" I said, seeing a way out in a moment of clarity. "It's kind of creepy." "Not as creepy as standing here, whispering about her, clearly staring but not greeting her at all." And he twisted his arm out of my grip and waved at her. She didn't wave back. She didn't react at all. "Okay, that's also kinda creepy," I said, shuddering. "Dude, chill, she's probably some sort of DeviantArt suicide girl who's out here taking artsy Instagram pictures." "Doesn't mean she isn't creepy," I mumbled, a bit embarrassed. He was right, of course. I was being silly. We continued. I turned back a few times. She just stood there, staring. I shuddered. The little incline got rocky, and I was forced to keep my eyes on the ground. The next time I turned back, she was gone. "So, that girl back there," Jack said a bit later. "Don't you think she kinda looked like Kate?" Oh no, I thought, here we go. Kate was Jack's ex-girlfriend. She had stood by him through a lot, but finally Jack's self-destructive behavior, combined with his compulsive cheating while touring, had been enough for her. She left him, and moved on with her life. Jack didn't. I did not want to spend this whole time at the cabin talking about Kate, and how Jack would get her back. Frankly, I was happy that Kate left him. She deserved better. Jack was a blast as a friend, but he was a pretty horrible boyfriend. "Isn't Kate brunette?" I asked, frowning. "That girl was blonde." No. She wasn't blonde. She definitely had the same hair color as Kate. Brown. Really? I could have sworn it was blonde. I mused. Maybe the sun made it look lighter to me. A few hours later, we threw our packs down on the patio of the little cabin. It was next to a small lake, surrounded by tall, dark fir trees. The cabin itself was small, made of big logs from the property. My great-grandfather had built it himself. He used to go there to hunt. There was no power, no running water. Just a rainwater tank for cleaning, and a groundwater well for drinking. And a lake, for swimming. I was there to finish my PhD thesis. I needed some time with no distractions, no communications, no internet to pull everything together, and into a coherent document. It was gonna be just me and a typewriter. No internet, no people, no distractions. Jack, on the contrary, was there specifically to distract himself. He had been in a pretty successful band, and had developed a pretty serious heroin addiction along the way. The rest of the band had given him an ultimatum: get clean or get out. I met Jack when I went to college in the States. Jack and I had been roommates at NYU. I had been the nerdy Norwegian kid, and he had been a cool musician from New Jersey who took me under his wing. A few weeks earlier, he had called me from rehab to ask if he could stay with me for a while after he got out. I told him I was spending the summer at the old family cabin. He begged to come along. I couldn't say no. Frankly, a part of me had been relieved. I didn't relish the idea of being alone at the cabin. Don't get me wrong, I loved that place. I had so many wonderful memories from it. Of me running around in the forest, of picking wild huckleberries and cloudberries, of hiking the mountains and swimming in the lake, of sitting in front of the fireplace as Grandma told old half-forgotten fairy tales. But inevitably, those days would end with me in bed in the little room next to the kitchen, the one that didn't have curtains. The window looked out on the forest. At midsummer, the sun would set, but it didn't get completely dark. This sort of dusky half-light made it too easy to see the forest. My head would be reeling with the tales of my grandmother, of unnamed and named strangers and heroes as they interacted with the plethora of terrifying denizens that made up Norwegian folklore. I would spot witches and trolls, gnomes and vetter and other underground people lurking at the edge of the forest. When the nights got darker as the summer came to an end, the creatures would crawl closer to the window. They would somehow always remain just at the edge of my vision, where I could see something, but wouldn't be able to tell what it was. It was as if they knew how far I could see. As a grown man, of course, I knew these were just figments of a child's overactive imagination. But that didn't mean the memories didn't send shivers down my spine. I figured bringing Jack would be nice. Except Jack's idea of nature was the Jersey Shore, and his idea of wilderness was Central Park. He knew nothing about the woods. That night, as I tried educating Jack on the things to watch out for in the woods, it occurred to me that it was my grandmother's stories that had really kept me out of trouble as a child. Sure, my parents had an endless list of rules. Don't swim in the lake, you can get a cramp and die. Don't go onto the marsh, you can get sucked into a hole and die. Don't go into the woods, you'll get lost and, guess what, die. You see, my grandmother didn't just give me rules to follow. She told me old fairy tales that she embellished and made local for my benefit. Don't go to the water. That's where the Nook lives. He'll drag you down into the lake and let you drown there. Don't go to the marsh, the underground people will lure you off your path, and into a hole and let you die there. Don't go to the woods, the Hooter will call for you in her sweetest voice, and you'll end up inside the mountain with her for all eternity. I'm pretty sure my grandmother really believed the stories herself. Her mother, certainly, had believed in every single story ever told, and claimed to have seen dwarves and Nisser in the woods, and even heard the Nook play his fiddle in the waterfall. Come to think of it, my grandmother had too. For the record, this level of superstition is not common in Norway anymore. My other grandmother didn't believe in anything. She would tell me stories about how her mother used to hide when the priest walked by. As a child, I had believed in everything too. I remember telling my parents that I saw trolls and witches in the woods at night. They just laughed it off, saying the darkness played tricks on me. In hindsight, that makes total sense. It's amazing what a young, terrified brain will see in the shadows of tall fir trees. It had sure seemed real to me then. I tried to impart some of this wisdom on Jack, but I feel like I didn't manage to sear it into his brain the way my grandmother had done with me. I thought he would be fine. I thought the woods weren't really dangerous. The days went by, and we got into a routine. I would get up early to write. I'd make breakfast for the both of us, which we'd eat together. He'd leave to go explore around the cabin, and I'd write the whole day. He would come back and cook dinner for us. At night, we'd chill, play guitar, and read fairy tales from the old book my grandmother had left behind there. One night, I told him about all the warnings my grandmother had given me about the underground people. Wait, your grandmother actually believed that shit? Yeah, man, she swears she saw the Hooter in the woods here. The Hooter? What's that? She's like a hot female troll lady. I explained, eloquently as always. She uses her good looks to lure young men into the mountain, and keeps them there forever. The Norwegian word for, I guess mesmerized, actually translates directly into mountain taken. It's like the ultimate goal of the underground people to trick humans into joining them down there. I think the Hooter wants you to marry her, and then when you do, she reveals that she's actually super ugly, and then you're trapped in the mountain for all eternity. That's creepy. Yeah, a lot of Norwegian folklore is pretty grim. But I guess people died in the mountains all the time, so they needed something fucking creepy to explain why. God, I used to be so scared of the undergrounders. My grandma really did a number on me. Or did she keep you safe? You're still here, right? He grinned at his own joke. I laughed along. And then one day, Jack came back from the woods with a strange look on his face. So, the weirdest thing happened to me today. He told me after dinner. I was just walking along, and I hear a voice call out in the forest. Like, I swear to God, this is real. Just called my name. And you know the weirdest part? He said, looking puzzled. It sounded just like Kate. I got chills all the way down to my toes. What? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you mean? I heard Kate call my name. You didn't tell her I was here, did you? He asked excitedly. I shook my head. I hadn't talked to Kate in years. I was worried about him. He had told me he was gonna get Kate back now that he was clean. It had been the partying, after all, that made him do all those things that made her leave. Now that he was clean, she'd definitely take him back. I realized she was most of his motivation to stay on the wagon, and it worried me. I didn't believe for a second that she would take him back. I wondered what he would do when he realized it was truly over, that she had moved on. Nah, I guess that would be crazy. He mused, well, I guess I was just hearing things. I have to admit, I was daydreaming about her at the time. He had been talking about Katie a lot. I was worried about him. I wanted him to find something else to obsess over. I was fairly confident Kate was done with him forever. He wasn't. But there was something else that worried me too. Something I knew was crazy, irrational. Something I tried to stow away in the back of my mind. But as I went to sleep that night, I couldn't help but picture my grandmother's weathered face as she warned me. They call for you using the voices of your loved ones. When you're weak and tired, don't give in to them. It had been the one piece of advice I had never understood why she would give me. If I was lost in the woods, shouldn't I go towards the voices of my parents? Why would she tell me that unless she knew something dark and wild lived in the forest? Maybe my grandmother's stories weren't just stories. Final. A few days later, after dinner, Jack talked about Kate again. We had made a fire, and were both reading. I was laying on the couch, he was sitting in the big chair in the corner. I couldn't really see his face. Hey, Carl? What? So, the weirdest thing happened to me today. What's that? I was sitting in that clearing by the stream that you showed me, you know? Yeah? And I swear I saw someone in the forest. That's not so weird though. I mean, it's not exactly busy, but it's not unthinkable that someone else was hiking there. Yeah, so that's not the weird part thought. The weird part is, it looked just like Kate. What? I choked, my heart beating faster. I mean, it can't have been her. Right? He paused. No, that's crazy. Ha ha ha, like she's sneaking around in a Norwegian forest. But it just really looked like her. I didn't know what to say. I mean, I followed her. She was gone before I could catch up. I almost got lost too. If I hadn't found the stream, I might have been out there still. Dude, that's dangerous. You should be careful. I know, or the underground people will get me. He laughed at his own joke. I didn't. But. Are you okay? If you're hallucinating Kate's in the forest and running after them, that's not good. Yeah, man. Probably just an acid flashback, eh? He laughed again. Or, you know, wishful hallucinations. God, I miss her though. Be careful though. I don't want to go do search and rescue for you in the woods here, I have a thesis to write. Yes, Mom. And that was the end of that conversation. The next day he came back from his hiking, with that strange expression on his face. Longing. He didn't speak much at all, that day. That wasn't too odd for us, we used to go for days without talking when we were in college. It was fine. Except I knew it wasn't fine. Something was wrong with Jack. Dude, are you, like, cool? I had asked tentatively. Yeah bro, why? Nothing. That was the whole conversation. I remember thinking I couldn't force him to open up. But I should have pushed more. I should have tried. I wondered if he was using again, somehow. It was a ridiculous thought. How the hell would he get his hands on junk here? He didn't even know how to drive. Unless he'd found a dealer in the forest somewhere. Which was obviously crazy. He just had that look that he used to have. When he was jonesing. I decided it must be his missing Kate look. I decided not to worry. That was a mistake. I had decided to come along with Jack on his hikes. I didn't feel comfortable letting him go out in the woods alone, not in the state he was in. I wasn't exactly sure what state that was, but it seemed unsafe. He had seemed a bit annoyed when I suggested it, but he couldn't really say no. He was crashing at my place, after all. What's that? I stopped dead in my tracks. We were about 2 hours from the cabin, deep in the woods. I could have sworn I spotted someone about 50 meters off the path. A woman. What's that in the woods? That's her. That's Kate. No, man, it's just an old tree stump. I didn't understand how I could have thought it was a woman. On closer inspection, it was clearly a tree stump. No, 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 no. That was her. I'm going after her. Listen, she's calling for me. It's Kate, Carl, I'm telling you. Don't be so fucking crazy, man. Kate is in America. All the way across the ocean. She's sure as hell not skulking around in a random forest in Norway. Don't you think if she followed you all the way here, she'd maybe give you a call? Or, you know, drop by the cabin to say hi? You're losing your fucking mind. God, I have to get you out of here. No, I'm going after her. There's no one there. Just fucking trees. No need to yell, I hear you. He looked wistfully into the trees. Damn, you're right, aren't you? I'm losing my mind. Let's go home, bud. We should leave tomorrow. I think the isolation is driving us both a little crazy. Maybe you should think about going back to rehab, or maybe talk to someone or something, you know? I'm not going back to rehab, he said flatly. Then he added, in a dry tone, but you're right. I do seem to be losing my mind, don't I? Maybe it's all this nature. Never seen so much damn nature before. I didn't really know what to say to that, so I suggested we start walking again. That was the last thing I ever said to him. We continued the long trek back to the cabin in silence. I put in my headphones and listened to some music. Sometimes the silence of the forest just gets to you. And I didn't want any more Kate conversations either. The uneven path required me to focus, so I looked down on the ground, the walking becoming trance-like. Suddenly, a squirrel ran across the path and up in a tree. Then it just sat there on a high branch, looking at us. I pointed at it, pulling out my headphones. Check it out, I whispered. Cute, no? No answer. I turned around. Nobody was there. Jack was gone. I figured he had fallen behind. I retraced my steps, walked back along the path, up on a little hill. I couldn't see him at anywhere. Jack, I yelled. Jack, where are you? No reply. Just the wind in the firs. Jack, I bellowed. Jack, where the fuck are you? I stood there quietly, listening. Then. Carl? It was faint, far off. How the hell had he gotten so far away so fast? He must have ran. I wondered if it was because I talked about rehab. Running away from me in the middle of a forest in Norway was a ridiculous thing for him to do. It's not like I could make him go to rehab. Jack. Carl? Where the hell are you? Carl? Oh, for God's sake, I muttered, I have to go find the idiot, don't I? I went off the path, following the voice. Jack? I yelled every 5 meters. Carl? The answer, somehow further away each time. I followed his voice for a good hour. Jack? Nothing. Jack? I yelled. Jack? I yelled until my voice was hoarse. I moved around, trying to look between the firs. It was getting darker. How late was it? It hadn't been that late when we left, had it? How was it getting dark already? I frowned, looking around. I had no clue where the path was. Fun. I cursed under my breath. Fuck. I needed to get back. Night was falling. Jack was probably back at the cabin. He had probably never even left the path. Why hadn't I just gone back along the path? He had probably just gone back for a bit. It had sounded so much like he was in the woods, though. Well, I figured, time to get out the GPS, and find my way home. I threw my backpack down on the ground, and opened it. My heart dropped. Jack had the GPS. Jack had the map. Jack had the compass. I was carrying our water bottles. I took it so that we wouldn't get water on the navigation gear. I was lost, alone in the forest, and night was falling. I frantically reached for the phone in my pocket. No battery. It had been playing music the whole time I searched for Jack, of course the battery was dead. Fun. I cursed again. I rubbed my face wearily. I looked around. I could just see the outline of my shoeprint in the soft ground. My tracks. I could follow my tracks back. I sighed in relief. I could find my way back after all. I walked about 50 meters before I realized it was futile. It got too difficult to see the tracks. My heart sank as I realized I'd have to spend the night in the forest. It was the only sensible thing to do. If I tried going back now, I'd lose the tracks and end up God knows where. I shuddered. I really didn't want to stay out here, alone, in the dark. I didn't really have a choice. Stumbling blindly around in the forest had no purpose. And I had a rather thick coat in the backpack. I'd survive. I remember Jack making fun of me for taking it. "You don't know how cold Norwegian summer nights can get, Jack. Trust me, bring a jacket." Jack didn't bring a jacket. But Jack had the GPS. He was probably back at the cabin, wondering where the hell I'd gotten off to. Maybe he was out searching for me. I hoped he realized that searching at night is pointless. Jack was fine. Jack had to be fine. I got out my Swiss Army knife, and started cutting branches off the nearest fir, making a bed. Fir branches make a pretty good sleeping pad, if you don't mind being terribly uncomfortable. They insulate though. Get you off that cold ground. And cutting branches gave me something to do, for a while. I got more branches than I needed. I made my bed at the foot of a giant fir tree. For some reason I wanted to have my back against something solid. So I could sit comfortably, I told myself. I tried not to acknowledge the nagging thought at the back of my mind. The real reason. I didn't want somebody to be watching me from behind. I kept my knife in my hand, and pulled my jacket tight around me. I closed my eyes, trying to fall asleep. I'd just fall asleep, I told myself, and wake up the next morning. Easy. But I was so hungry. As I was sitting there, shivering beneath the tree, I wondered where Jack was. I thought back to him calling my name. Something was a bit off about it. It had been him, clearly. But something just didn't seem right. I couldn't quite put my figure on it. I replayed the memory in my mind. Then it clicked. My whole body turned to ice. It was the R. It wasn't Jack's clearly enunciated American R. The voice had used the Norwegian inflection, almost skipping the R. Something had called for me using Jack's voice. Something that was still in this forest. I clutched the knife tighter in my right hand. "Fawn," I whispered. "Fawn, fawn, fawn, fawn. Don't call the devil," a voice whispered right by my ear. "You never know if he's gonna answer." My heart nearly stopped. My whole body froze. It was my grandmother's voice. I looked around frantically for the source. Nothing. My grandmother was dead. Of course she wasn't here. I must have dozed off for a moment. That was the only reason. Don't call the devil? Oh, right, fawn. The common Norwegian swear word meant devil. My grandmother always told us not to use it. Don't take the Lord's name in vain, it's a sin. Don't call the devil, he might just answer. I shuddered, drawing my jacket tighter around me. I got my breathing under control. My heartbeat calmed down. I let my eyelids droop. "Carl?" a female voice whispered in the darkness. My whole body snapped to attention. I looked around wildly. Nothing again. My eyes strained against the darkness. "Carl?" My mother's voice. She was in Oslo. I promised her I'd call her tonight. What was happening to me? Was I losing my mind as well? "Carl, come here, baby. Don't be afraid." I remembered my grandmother's warning. They'll talk to you in the voices of your loved ones. Don't listen. Don't follow. You'll be lost. I clutched my Swiss Army knife tighter. Like it would help. Like I could fight the underground people. Here, in the forest, in the dark. Ever. "Carl?" Something moved in front of me. Just at the edge of my vision. I tried to make myself as small as possible. I tried to press myself into the tree. "Carl, come to me." "No," I yelled, brandishing the knife. "Go away." I felt tears wet my cheeks. The shape remained just at the edge of my vision. "Carl, why don't you put down the knife?" My knuckles whitened around the knife. At that moment, nothing could have convinced me to let go of my only weapon, no matter how useless it was. "Carl, don't be like this. Come to me." "Carl, it's so much easier to just come." This time, the voice of an ex I had never gotten over. "Don't fight it, Carl." The whispers lasted all night. They pleaded, they threatened, they laughed. I lay in a little ball under the tree, clutching the knife like it was the only thing I had to hold on to. It was the only thing I had to hold on to. They tried to convince me to let go of the knife, to come with them into the dark. They said I'd be happier. They said I'd never worry again. They said I'd be free. I just lay there, muttering. No 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 no, leave me alone, no no no, I whimpered. Carl, baby, don't fall asleep now. Come play with us, Carl. No. I woke up, sun shining in my eyes. I looked around, puzzled. It took me a moment to realize where I was. In the forest. Jack. I had to find Jack. God, I had to find me. I had to find the cabin. I tried to find my tracks again, but they were gone. I couldn't dwell on the reasons, I had to keep moving. I knew I had walked west from the path, so if I walked straight towards the sun, I should eventually hit the path. As I walked, my mind went back to the night. It must have been a dream. Of course it was a dream. It had felt so real though. But it was a dream. Obviously. Well, a nightmare. It took me hours to find the path. I had no idea I'd walked that far the night before. I was really starting to worry that I had accidentally crossed the path without noticing when I stumbled on it. The feeling of relief was one of the most intense I've ever felt. It was short-lived, though. I made it back to the cabin. No Jack. Maybe he had gone to look for me? He couldn't possibly think he would find me. The GPS didn't have endless battery either. God, I hoped he wasn't lost in the forest like me. I knew looking for him was stupid. I had no idea where he left the path, and my rescue mission last night had ended in a solid failure. If he was out there, I needed help finding him. I needed to call for help. I cursed the stupid solar charger we had brought. It had stopped working yesterday. Jack's phone would surely be out of battery too by now. Why did I ever switch from my old Nokia phone? Stupid smartphones. I decided to write him a note that I had gone to get help. That he should stay at the cabin if he came back. I got to the car. I juiced my phone and called Jack. Straight to voicemail. No more battery, then. I called the nearest police office. They searched the woods for weeks before they gave up. Everyone from the local area joined. A huge search party. Nothing. Not a trace. Jack was just gone. Rationally, I know he just got lost. There are so many ways you could die out there. He might have fallen into a hole, gotten tangled up in a lake, gotten stuck in a marsh, hidden somewhere for shelter where he became impossible to spot as he froze to death. Of course there was a rational explanation. Of course I would have nightmares about the underground people when I was shivering alone in the forest. Nightmares aren't real. I had almost started believing that too. Almost stopped blaming myself. Until last week, that is. I had been clearing out my old room at my parents' place, when I found a pile of birthday cards. The one my grandmother had given me along with the Swiss Army knife was among them. Dear Carl. Make sure you always keep this with you in the woods, you never know when you'll need to make a fire, or a makeshift bed. And remember, the underground people are scared of steel. Keep it close, and you'll be safe out there. Grams. It didn't mean anything, of course. Grams was superstitious. I had a nightmare. Except before that last hike, I had snuck Jack's knife away from him. I thought he might hurt himself. He had seemed so unstable. I left him all alone out there, and took the only thing he could have used to defend himself. I'm opening another bottle of whiskey. Please don't judge me too harshly. God, I wonder where Jack is now. Posted by u/PocketOxford. Don't follow the fiddler. When I was a child, I would spend my summers in my grandparents' old cabin in the woods, deep in the valleys of eastern Norway. My grandmother grew up in the area, and would tell me horrible tales of the underground people, to scare me away from breaking the rules, to keep me safe when I played alone around the cabin. Let's just say that recent events has made me consider that these might have been more than old-fashioned campfire stories to scare a young child. Don't worry, you don't have to read all that. You should read this though. The more you know, right? Well, here's the story. Just like my grandmother would tell it. I was young, then. Very young. And it was long before I ever met your grandfather. I want you to remember that when you hear the story, okay? I was all alone at the farm. Did you ever see the farm? Did we sell it before you were born? I can't remember. It was in the next valley over from this one. The woods were the same as here though. Tall, dark, fir trees. So easy for someone to hide. Something to hide. And they did hide there, the somethings. They still do. Oh dear, where was I? Oh. My parents were poor. Back then we rented the little piece of land. We grew some potatoes and owned some hens. Later, a few cows. Nothing like these huge subsidized farms we have these days. Oh, what my father could have done if someone only helped him. Well, that's not the story I'm telling, so just forget about all that. I was all alone on the farm. My parents had gone to market. My brothers had gone to America to try their luck, as poor people did in those days. Died over there too, but that's neither here nor there. I was alone on the farm. Stop me if I start rambling again. Will you? Well, I was out on the marsh, picking cloudberries. Those days we needed all the food we could get. It had been a beautiful, sunny day, which was drawing to an end. I looked wistfully at the forest as the wet marsh started seeping through my left shoe. I moved to a different patch of berries, hoping it'd be a drier experience. Then I heard it. Faint, far away, but clear as day. A fiddle. Now, I always loved the sound of the fiddle. I didn't get to hear it very often. Every once in a while, a fiddler would come to our little village, and if father was feeling generous, I'd get to go to the dance. That's how I met your grandfather, too. But that's another story for another day. I heard the fiddle. I was curious, I wanted to know who was playing a fiddle out here. And then the music got to me. It was bewitching, to say the least. It thrilled, jumped, gurgled and laughed, just like a stream. It roared like a waterfall, it flowed like a calm river. It moved me into my soul, into my bones. I've never heard such beautiful music. Not before, not after. Not in all the years I've been alive did I hear something as beautiful as what that fiddler played. I couldn't do anything but follow. I had to see who it was who could create such beauty. I couldn't stop myself. I ran through the woods. I dodged between trees, I jumped over rocks, I slipped on moss. I ran, I trudged, I crawled. All the time, that sweet, sweet sound was getting louder. It filled my body, filled my whole mind. It took away any misgivings, any suspicions. I just needed to know who could make such beautiful music. Suddenly, I was at the river. I hardly even noticed where I was. I could hear the waterfall. The rushing sound of the water blended with the fiddle playing. It became an orchestra, a whole symphony. I walked slowly towards it. I knew the music came from the waterfall. I needed to go there. That music. Oh, if you could only have heard that music. I walked slowly towards the edge. And then the music stopped. My head snapped up, and I froze. Because there he was. Right in front of me. The most beautiful young man I have ever seen. He had blonde, beautiful hair down past his chin. His young face was smooth, no hint of stubble. High cheekbones, a strong jaw. And his eyes. His bright blue eyes had a wild look in them. A hungry look. They made me quiver. Hypnotized me. I have never felt less safe, never felt so alive as I did in that moment when our eyes locked. I was frozen to the ground. I couldn't have moved if I wanted to. 10 wild horses couldn't have made me move. He put the fiddle down on the ground, carefully, never looking away from me. Anna, he whispered my name. The word moved through my whole body, stirred parts of me that had never been stirred before. It was electric. Come. His voice was smooth, melodic. It sounded like the first stream in spring, after the long winter. Like a lazy river on hazy summer eve. Nonsense, I know. But if you could hear it, you'd understand. He held out his hand for me. Beckoning. Pulling. As I moved to take it, my hair shifted, exposing the silver crucifix I wore around my neck. He flinched, frowning at me. He pulled his hand back, shaking his head. Then he turned around. Picked up the fiddle, and walked straight into the water. Then he was gone. I stood there, shaking all over. But the spell had been broken. I knew what he was. What he was trying to do. The Nook. I knew the stories, of course. He'd spellbind young girls with his music, and then have them drown themselves. I said a quick prayer, holding the crucifix. They don't like things of Christ, things of silver, things of steel. As long as you have that, you are safe. As long as you're strong enough. I know I almost wasn't. I had half a mind to throw away the crucifix and jump into the waterfall, just to see if he would play again. But I didn't. For weeks I longed for that music. For weeks I tried convincing myself that it was dark, wild, evil. As the days passed, and the memory faded, I became stronger in my convictions. I was a child of the Lord, the wild things in the woods would not make me stray from my path. I would be strong. But then I heard the music again, and my resolve faltered. Melted away, like snow under the spring sun. I wanted nothing more than to go with that man, that beautiful young man who could play the fiddle like the devil himself. Even if I knew what he was. Even if I knew he wasn't one of God's creatures. Oh, what he made me feel wasn't of God. But all I wanted was to be with him. If only for a brief moment. Maybe an eternity of damnation would be worth if I could just hear that voice, if I could just feel his touch. Just for a moment. But no. I wasn't gonna go easy. I was a fighter. I ran inside, slamming the door shut. Bolting it. I stuffed my fingers in my ears, but that didn't drown out the music. That beautiful, dark, wild music. Music that no human could ever produce. Music that made me want to run into the woods, rip my clothes off, and jump in the river. Music that made me want to turn my back on the Lord himself. I had to fight the temptation. With every fiber of my being, I fought it. I would not have my soul doomed, trapped under the ground for eternity. I locked myself in my room with my Bible. I prayed, I pleaded, I fought. I have no idea how long I was in the room. I sang hymns in a loud voice. I screamed, I whispered forgotten curses and prayers, I read the Bible loud in a loud voice. All the while, the music rose and fell, the music pleaded, persuaded, and pulled at me. Made me feel things I never felt before. Made me feel alive and dying at the same time. I couldn't fight it anymore. I had to go to him. I reached for the key, put it in the lock. Silence. I cracked the door to my room. Nothing. It was the last time I ever heard that beautiful, wild music. I know I should thank the Lord above for not leading me into temptation, but there's a part of me that will always long for that song. I only realized how lucky I had been a few days later. You see, something else happened that day. The day I heard the fiddle was the last time Mari from the village was seen alive. She was found floating in the lake a few days later, naked. Drowned. They said she drowned herself because of a lover that spurned her. Apparently, she had taken quite the shine to the fiddler at the last dance. Evil tongues whispered that she was carrying his child. But I knew better. She hadn't been thinking of that fiddler. That fiddler seemed like a joke, a child playing with instruments, nothing compared to him. I knew exactly what had made her go into the water. I had been so close to doing it myself. But if he hadn't gotten her, Carl, I don't know if either of us would be here today. So child, listen to me carefully. Stay away from the river, stay away from the waterfall. Don't go into the woods alone. Don't follow the fiddler. Don't go with him. You may not ever come back.